And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, AP Biology, and this is AP Biology Daily. My name is Chris Mansour, and I'm coming to you from room 102 at Tiffin-Columbian High School. And today, topic 3.5, photosynthesis, and this is daily video 2. This lesson will explain how the process of photosynthesis allows organisms to capture and store energy. The skill that we're going to focus on in this video is how to support a scientific claim, which is a very important skill to have when for the AP exam that's coming up in May, even though it's only September now. So what will we learn? What is chlorophyll's role in boosting electron energy levels? And that's important because by energizing those electrons is how we can transfer energy. How do photosystem 1 and 2 work together to create a proton gradient which facilitates ATP synthesis? And how are the products of the light-dependent reaction used in the Calvin cycle? There's a lot of content in this video, so you may want to kind of pause it, go through and find some vocabulary words you might not be familiar with. So let's get to our first important point. During photosynthesis, chlorophylls absorb energy from light. And so what role do chlorophylls play in this process? So maybe pause the video, jot down some ideas. Well, what they do is the chlorophylls, they capture energy from sunlight and convert it to these high energy electrons. And so what happens to these electrons or these chlorophyll electrons when light absorption occurs, and what's the importance of this? Electrons will be energized. The energy from the electrons will be used to establish a proton gradient and reduce NADP plus to NADPH. So the important part there is a reduction. So photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 are our next topic, and these are embedded in the internal membrane of the chloroplast. So I have a picture there for you showing you PS2 to PS1. Again, they are placed in the membrane in the order that they were discovered. So PS1 first, PS2. And so what is a photosystem? So again, maybe think about this, pause the video. But essentially what a photosystem is, it's a light capturing unit in a chloroplast thylakoid membrane. And so I've placed the blue box around those photosystems. So you see photosystem 2 to photosystem 1. And so again, that's where that sunlight is going to be captured. And why is the hydrolysis of water, which we see underneath, necessary as it relates to photosystem 2 and the light-dependent reactions? Well, the hydrogen molecules from the splitting of that water are released into the thylakoid space, and those hydrogens are going to be used to create an electrochemical proton gradient. So often electrochemical proton gradient, if you remember, creating a concentration gradient. And so as you can see where that blue arrow just came in, there's the water, hydrolysis occurs, and we now have oxygen in those H pluses. The key point there, follow those H pluses. Next, when those electrons are transferred between molecules in a reaction, they pass through the electron transport chain. And so again, I'm going to highlight the electron transport chain for you there in blue. Again, pause the video. I always like to have my students draw pictures and maybe write captions, so it might be a good time to maybe pause the video and redraw this. But how are photosystem 2 and photosystem 1 functionally related to the electron transport chain? Great question. Well, here's the answer. PS2 and PS1 pass high energy electrons to the electron transport chain. A lot of electron terms here, I know. And so that's their function, is to pass these electrons along the line. And so I've mentioned this a couple times, what actually is an electrochemical proton gradient? So it's a difference in concentration of protons, or those hydrogen ions, those H pluses, across a membrane. As you can see, the whole point is trying to create this proton gradient. And so let's talk more about this proton gradient. So the formation of this proton gradient is linked to the synthesis of ATP, which is all the way down there at the end of my image. So photosynthesis uses a form of passive transport, if you remember, hopefully passive transport, to generate ATP from ADP. We got to make some ATP, right? And so what happens is, there's my arrow, and you can see ADP, ATP. There is that proton gradient being used to produce that. And so what is ATP synthase? We know it's an enzyme because it ends in ase, right? So synthase, it's going to synthesize. So ATP synthase is an enzyme that creates ATP when those protons pass through the enzyme. So again, if you look at that picture there, those H plus are going to pass through, going to produce some ATP. And so finally, our last main idea, though, is the energy captured in the light powers the production of carbohydrates in the Calvin cycle. So the Calvin cycle uses the products of the light-dependent reactions, ATP, NADPH, and carbon dioxide, which is brought in, it's not a product, and produces carbohydrates. And so there you go, in that blue box there, we see the ATP coming in, we see the NADPH, again, those are coming in from the light-dependent reactions. There's our CO2 coming in from the atmosphere, which I'm going to allude to here in another bullet, and down there at the bottom, there's our sugars. And so what's the ultimate goal of the Calvin cycle reaction? I kind of already gave it away. make organic products that plants need using the products from the light reactions of photosynthesis. So down there at that bottom of that blue arrow, there's your sugars, because plants need those organic products as well. And so where do plants and other organisms mainly get their carbon dioxide from? I already gave it away. I answered it in the first bullet. They get it from their carbon dioxide from the environment. And so again, looking at this picture, as long as you know the products and reactants, what's going in, what's going out will be very helpful. So let's do some practice. So lesson, skill, focus, argumentation. So we're going to support a claim with evidence. Again, evidence is key. We're going to support that from biological principles, concepts, processes, and or data. So here is a multiple choice question, argumentation. A researcher claims that a certain herbicide suppresses plant growth by inhibiting chloroplast function. To test the claim, we're testing something, the researcher treats isolated chloroplasts with increasing concentrations of the herbicide. The data from the experiment are presented in Table 1. I'm not going to go over Table 1 with you. You can read that. So here's the question. Which of the following statements best describes, and again, describes the results in Table 1? You can go through and read options A, B, C, and D, pause the video, and then when we come back, we're going to see how you did. And we're back. I'm a little too excited, but we're back. And let's see, how many had A? I'm in my classroom again by myself. A's, I'll pretend my students are here, okay. B's, okay, maybe, all right. C, couple of you. D, correct answer is B. ATP synthase activity depends on a proton gradient across the thylakoid membrane. Gold star, pat on the back, you got it right. Maybe if you struggle a little bit, you know, rewind, back up this video a little bit. But again, all it's about the ATP synthase. So what should we take away? The key takeaways, and again, there was a lot of information in this video, is that chlorophyll captures energy from sunlight and excites those electrons. It's all about the electrons. As the electrons pass through that ETC or electron transport chain, protons are actively transported across a membrane. They establish a gradient, and then those protons will diffuse through ATP synthase, that enzyme powering ATP synthesis, producing more ATP. The ATP, NADPH, and CO2 are used during the Calvin cycle to produce carbohydrates through a series of reactions. So as I mentioned before, the products now become the reactants. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to again thank all you AP biology teachers out there working so hard to get your kids ready. And again, this is Chris Monsoor. I'm signing off from room 102 in Tiffin Columbian High School. Have a